Under the dim lights of Brooklyn, amidst the biting cold rain, a man named John Hawk Mitchell sat quietly, his gaze filled with longing as if it held an entire sky of memories. He was once a Delta Force warrior, but the nightmares from Afghanistan clung to him like a darkness that would never fade. Have you ever wondered what makes a person keep getting back up when everything seems to have fallen apart? Hawk felt like he had lost all hope until one fateful night when he accidentally overheard the keyword echelon in a noisy bar. A terrible conspiracy was lurking in New York, and Hawk knew he couldn't just stand by and watch. His journey takes us from the bustling streets of Times Square to secret bases where truth and danger intertwine. Can a lonely veteran confront the darkness that looms over the city? Join Hawk as he steps into this battle. What do you think he will do next? Share your thoughts, because the story has only just begun. A rainy evening in Brooklyn, New York, the streetlights reflecting off the droplets on the pavement, creating a scene that is both beautiful and melancholic. The sound of the rain falling gently blends with a somber tune, like a quiet whisper in the heart of the bustling city. In a small apartment, John Hawk Mitchell, a former member of Delta Force, sits alone, his gaze lost in thought as he looks outside. At 50 years old, he still has the rugged appearance of his younger days, but the look in his eyes, marked by the scars of his soul, reveals memories of pain and nightmares that never seem to fade away. Hawk slowly woke up from the nightmare, where the images of his teammates ambushed in Afghanistan still haunted his mind. He took a sip of whiskey, feeling the bitter taste wash over his mouth, then drifted back into his murky thoughts. Looking out the window, his apartment seemed small and lonely amidst the twinkling lights of Manhattan, where life continued bustling on, despite the hidden pain. In Times Square, where the crowd flows like a river, the bright neon lights create a vibrant atmosphere. But amidst all the chaos, Hawk feels a deep sense of loneliness. The laughter, the chatter, the lively music, all of it only highlights the silence within his soul. On the TV screen at a nearby bar, a news segment wraps up with a warning about recent cyber attacks, hinting at a lurking terrorist threat, which weighs heavily on his heart. In Hawk's mind, the memories of his mission are not just tales of triumph, but also of mistakes and pain that he can never forget. The bar in Brooklyn is where he reunites with an old friend. The atmosphere here is warm, yet filled with smoke and loud chatter. Hawk steps in, his gaze sweeping over familiar faces, but no one truly understands him. As they talk, the surrounding noise fades into a blur, and in that moment he inadvertently eavesdrops on a conversation between two strangers. Their words are sharp and coded, but Hawk has seen enough to recognize a key term: echelon. Hawk furrowed his brow, feeling like something was off. These words reminded him of secret missions, battles that weren't just fought on the battlefield, but also in the tangled underworld of modern life. A thrill of anticipation surged within him. He knew his life would never be at peace until he got to the bottom of what was happening. He tried to stay calm, but he couldn't shake the tension in the air like a guitar string pulled tight. Hawk stepped out of the bar, the lights of Brooklyn seeming dimmer under the rain. The chaotic thoughts swirling in his mind made it hard for him to focus. How had he, someone who had once been involved in special missions, ended up facing an unclear threat? He knew he needed to take action, not just for himself, but for the people he had fought alongside. The feeling of loneliness, the pain from the past, all blended together into a powerful motivation. As Hawk stepped out of the bar, the heavy rain drummed on his hair, and his thoughts began to shift. He couldn't let fear and nightmares control his life any longer. Instead, he needed to seek answers, to dive back into the fight he thought he had left behind. New York, with all its hustle and bustle, now became the backdrop for his new journey. Hawk was not just a veteran. He was a man in search of the truth, and despite the wounds in his heart, he had decided not to give up. New York is drowning in mysteries, and Hawk will be the one to uncover them. Emotions surge within him, and the loneliness in his heart gradually gives way to determination. A new journey begins, and he won't let anything stand in his way. Hawk drove down the highway leading to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, home of Delta Force. The scenery outside quickly transformed from the towering buildings of the city to lush green forests, creating an atmosphere that was quiet yet filled with tension. Even though he had been here many times before, his heart felt heavy with the weight of the mission. The image of Colonel Maria Sanchez flashed in his mind, an old friend he once trusted during the fierce battles in the Middle East. Now, she was the liaison officer for JSOC, a role that was anything but easy. As Hawk stepped into the secure meeting room, he immediately felt the weight of the atmosphere. The four walls were lined with maps and classified information, and the harsh fluorescent lights made everything feel cold and sterile. Maria was waiting for him, her expression filled with determination. She looked a bit more seasoned, but her eyes still held the sharpness of a warrior. They greeted each other with a firm handshake, like old comrades reuniting after a long time apart. As soon as he sat down, Hawk began to share the conversation he had overheard. He spoke about a conspiracy that could threaten the safety of the entire nation. Maria nodded along, absorbing every detail. She quickly grabbed her laptop and started accessing the military intelligence system. With her fingers gliding effortlessly over the keyboard, Maria swiftly typed in the keyword echelon. A few seconds passed, and the screen lit up with a series of details about Echelon Corp., a military tech conglomerate based in New Jersey, with numerous suspicious transactions related to advanced weaponry and espionage technology. As Maria analyzed the data, Hawk felt a surge of anxiety. The intelligence data didn't just stop there. It opened up another path. A name appeared on the screen. James Carver. A former member of Delta Force, he had once been Hawk's teammate, but had betrayed him, dismissed for illegal activities. The image of Carver, with his cold gaze and sinister smile, sent a shiver down Hawk's spine. He couldn't believe that someone who had fought by his side could turn into an enemy. Maria looked up from the screen, her expression serious. "Hawk, if Carver is behind this plot, we need to act immediately. You know him better than anyone. He won't hesitate to strike if necessary." The weight in Hawk's heart grew heavier as he thought about what could happen. He wasn't just a traitor. He was a real threat to national security. After a brief discussion about the next steps, Hawk decided to head back to Brooklyn. However, as he left Fort Bragg, the tension in his heart remained unrelenting. Thoughts of Carver and his schemes swirled in his mind like raging waves. On the way home, his heart burned with a mix of anxiety and excitement for what lay ahead. He had only walked a short distance when suddenly a car came barreling out from a small alley on the right, blocking his path. Hawk managed to stop just in time, but a group of assassins emerged from the shadows, surrounding his vehicle. Time seemed to freeze as he quickly drew his gun and waited. The next moments are a life-and-death battle. Hawk is no longer an ordinary man. He is a warrior. He has faced many fights, but this time, the tension and adrenaline surge through him like never before. He aims at each assassin, using his close combat skills to evade unexpected attacks. The gunfire echoes in the stillness of the alley, but he has no time to be afraid. When the war ended, Hawk had escaped, but not unscathed. A minor wound on his shoulder sent sharp pains through him, but it was not enough to make him falter. He knew that in this world, there was no room for weakness. Enemies lurked in the shadows, and Carver's schemes were just beginning. The tension in his heart burned like an unquenchable fire, driving him to continue his quest for the truth. Hawk understood that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but he could not back down. Hawk sat in front of the computer screen, the dim light casting a serious glow on his face. Data from recent surveillance was flashing before him, and never before had he felt such immense pressure. Alongside Sanchez, his steadfast companion through tough times, they meticulously analyzed every detail of the secret plan that Carver was quietly orchestrating. As the information unfolded, a chilling sensation ran down Hawk's spine. Carver wasn't just looking to create chaos. He intended to unleash a biological weapon on Times Square on New Year's Eve, a massive event that millions would attend. It would be a disaster, an unimaginable shock for the entire nation. This wasn't just an attack on New York. It was an assault on the very trust people had in national security. Hawk knew they couldn't hesitate any longer. He lifted his gaze to Sanchez, his eyes filled with determination. They needed a strong team, people who had fought in brutal battles and understood the gravity of the situation. Without wasting a moment, he pulled out his phone and reached out to the 3 Delta Force veterans he trusted the most. First was Marcus "Tank" Johnson, an explosives expert with bulging muscles and a knack for quick calculations in high-pressure situations. Next was Lisa "Ghost" Chen, a sharpshooter with pinpoint accuracy down to the millimeter. Finally, there was David "Doc" Reynolds, a seasoned battlefield medic who could save anyone in the harshest conditions. They agreed to meet at an abandoned warehouse in Queens, the perfect spot for a secret discussion. As all 4 of them gathered, the atmosphere in the room grew tense, yet filled with determination. Hawk looked at each person in turn, and in that moment of silence, he felt the connection between them. They all understood that this was not just a mission. It was a fight for the survival of the city, the country, and themselves. A flash of the faces of comrades who had fallen in the war in Afghanistan crossed Hawk's mind, each face, each smile, and the painful memories. He reminded himself that he couldn't let a tragedy like that happen again. That was when he stood up, his eyes blazing, and said, "We're not just saving New York, we're saving our very souls." That declaration echoed in the space, like a promise not just to himself, but to those who had sacrificed so much. The team began preparing their weapons and planning their infiltration into Echelon Corp, where Carver was hiding. The sounds of equipment being assembled, maps being spread out, and bold plans being laid out filled the air. Each person had their own role, and Hawk felt the power of their unity. They weren't just a team, they were family. As the camera zoomed in on Hawk's determined face, everything seemed to freeze. Time became irrelevant. The mood among them was charged with resolve, a battle not just against an external enemy, but also a fight against the inner demons within each of them. In the dim light of an evening in New Jersey, the Hawk team was gearing up for their infiltration into the secret research facility of Echelon Corp. Lisa "Ghost" Chen, with her exceptional skills in breaking security systems, led the group. They stealthily made their way onto the grounds of the facility, where tall security fences and surveillance cameras monitored every corner. With the aid of high-tech equipment and Lisa's finesse, the team disabled the security devices, inching their way inside. Once inside, the atmosphere grew more tense. Hawk, the leader of the group, could feel the excitement radiating from each member's heart. They navigated through long hallways, the flickering fluorescent lights casting a cold and mysterious vibe. Finally, they stumbled upon a vast laboratory filled with cutting-edge scientific equipment. On the desk, Hawk spotted thick documents, which included information about the biological weapons Echelon was developing. These papers contained not only deadly formulas, but also revealed that Carver, the CEO of Echelon, had collaborated with a foreign power to fund this plan. With each page turned, Hawk felt his anxiety rising. What he discovered was not just a threat to America, but a war they couldn't avoid. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from outside the lab. Hawk's team immediately realized they had been discovered. The escape route became urgent. Lisa quickly devised a plan to get out of there while Hawk led everyone out of the room, their hearts pounding with worry. As soon as they burst out of the lab, a squad of Echelon mercenaries appeared, weapons at the ready. A fierce gunfight erupted, the crack of gunfire ringing out and bright flashes from bullets hitting the walls. Hawk and his team had to move swiftly, dodging bullets and searching for safe spots to return fire. Even though there was no time to think, the seamless coordination among the team members helped them hold their ground in this battle. The dramatic moments flew by like a whirlwind as they found the way out. Hawk, with his natural leadership, quickly guided everyone to the parking lot. There, he jumped into a truck, with the others following right behind him. The engine roared to life, and the vehicle tore away like a storm. But behind them, the mercenaries' cars were in relentless pursuit. Hawk gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to maneuver the truck through the narrow streets of New Jersey. Bullets were flying in from behind, and he had to skillfully dodge them, sometimes colliding with other vehicles to create distance from their pursuers. The adrenaline surged as their truck raced across the Brooklyn Bridge, the shimmering lights reflecting off the river below. They weren't just fleeing from death. They were escaping a terrifying conspiracy that was lurking in the shadows. In that tense moment, Hawk decided to hit the gas. The truck surged ahead, and with a sudden turn, he created a safe distance from their pursuers. However, the escape couldn't last forever. Once they finally shook off the mercenaries, Hawk's team knew this was just the beginning of a bigger battle. They had been exposed, and now Carver wouldn't hesitate to ramp up security at his base, making this fight a whole lot tougher. Inside the truck, everyone let out a sigh of relief as a temporary sense of safety enveloped them. But Hawk knew this wouldn't last long. The mood of the group was a mix of excitement and anxiety. They had uncovered a deadly plot that threatened their entire nation. Each person felt the heavy weight of responsibility on their shoulders, determined not to let Carver carry out his plan. Once again, they had to navigate through the darkness to find the light, for a safer future. In a small room of a safe house in Manhattan, Hawk sat lost in thought by the window. The dim light of the afternoon filtered through the heavy curtains, creating a heavy atmosphere. Inside him, the memories of Afghanistan lingered, like an unhealed wound. Vivid images of a failed mission, where his decisions had led to the deaths of close comrades, haunted him relentlessly. Hawk turned to Marcus "Tank" Johnson, his best friend and longtime teammate, worry etched in his eyes. "Tank, there are decisions a soldier has to make, and there are decisions that will haunt them for a lifetime." Hawk sighed, his voice dropping. "I ordered the retreat. I thought it was the safest choice, but it ended up costing them their lives." Those words felt like a knife, stabbing deep into his heart. Hawk felt like a coward, someone who abandoned his comrades when they needed him the most. Tank stood in silence, unsure of what to say to comfort him. He understood this pain, but he could never fully grasp the torment that Hawk was enduring. The atmosphere was thick with stillness, as if time had paused to let the hurt wash over them. But then, suddenly the air around them was shattered by a loud knock at the door. A cold voice rang out. It was David "Doc" Reynolds, the battlefield doctor they had once trusted. "It's time to talk," Doc said, his face showing no signs of worry. But in his eyes, Hawk sensed something was off. "I have important information." As Doc began to recount the recent events, no one in the room could have guessed that his words would be so shocking. Hawk felt a sharp pain in his heart when he heard Doc reveal that he was a spy for Carver, the enemy they had been fighting all this time. "I gave away your location to Echelon," Doc said calmly, as if he were discussing something ordinary. Hawk couldn't believe his ears. Everything felt like it was crumbling beneath him. This betrayal was not just a shock, but a devastating blow. The memories they shared, the battles they fought together, now felt like a cruel joke. Hawk's mood shifted into a storm. He felt the pain, the disappointment, and the anger rising up inside him. "Why?" he shouted, his voice echoing in the air. "Why do this to us?" But Doc just looked at him with a cold gaze, showing no remorse whatsoever. Just when everything was starting to spiral into chaos, gunfire erupted from outside. Echelon's mercenaries had attacked the safe house. Hawk instantly snapped from a daze into action. He signaled to Tank and the rest of the team. "We need to get out of here right now!" Hawk shouted, his voice filled with determination. In the midst of chaos, the group quickly moved out of the room, searching for a way to a nearby abandoned warehouse. Hawk took the lead, utilizing all the combat skills he had learned in the military. They faced a crowd of enemies, but with Delta Force tactics, Hawk guided the team through the fight with clarity and determination. The sound of gunfire erupted. The shattering of glass echoed, and the screams of mercenaries filled the air. Hawk felt the tension rising, but he wouldn't allow himself to back down. Despite being injured in a fierce battle, he kept fighting, protecting his teammates and guiding them to safety. Finally, amidst the chaos, Hawk spotted Lisa Ghost Chen, caught in the crossfire. Without a second thought, he charged toward her, ignoring the bullets whizzing by. With every ounce of strength he had left, he pulled Lisa from the clutches of death and brought her to safety. The determination in his eyes was not just for himself, but for those he cherished, the ones who had placed their trust in him. As everything settled down, in that moment of silence, Hawk stood amidst the rubble, a mix of disappointment and determination swirling within him. He knew that while some things were beyond his control, he still had the chance to make things right. Like a leaf in a storm, he wouldn't be brought down. Hawk was resolute in his vow to avenge those he had lost, and he would never let this betrayal defeat him. The battle at the abandoned factory in Staten Island unfolded in a suffocating atmosphere where the sounds of gunfire echoed throughout the space. The Hawk team, an elite unit of the Special Forces, had meticulously prepared for this mission to intercept a shipment of biological weapons before they could be transported into the heart of the city. However, standing in their way was a formidable and ruthless Echelon force, led by Carver, an enemy who was not only cunning, but also merciless. Hawk, the leader of the group, stood at the forefront, commanding everyone. He couldn't shake off the heavy pressure from this mission, but deep down, he knew there was no choice but to move forward. His teammates, each with their own skills and courage, stood beside him, ready to sacrifice for the greater cause. As the gunfire erupted, the flash from the weapons lit up the night like lightning, and their survival now depended on their fighting ability and the coordination of the entire team. However, everything unfolded differently than planned. Despite their careful preparation, the Hawk team was quickly overwhelmed by the sheer numbers and strength of the Echelon forces. Bullets rained down like a storm, and in that dark moment, chaos reached its peak. Hawk realized they had fallen into a trap. Unable to let his teammates fall into enemy hands, he decided to charge into the fray, protecting them with every ounce of strength he had. But that brave act turned out to be a disadvantage. When he was held tight, his teammates had to retreat, leaving Hawk in the enemy's grasp. Carver, with a satisfied smile, approached and softly said, "Hawk, it's finally time for us to meet." He ordered his henchmen to tie Hawk up, and in an instant, he was taken to a cold, dark cell where the unfeeling concrete walls closed in around him. The dark room was only illuminated by the faint flicker of a light bulb overhead. Hawk was trapped, a wave of helplessness washing over him. Meanwhile, Carver stepped in, his gaze filled with challenge. "I've been waiting for this moment for a long time, Hawk," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Do you know why? Because my plan is going to take me to the pinnacle of power, and you will be the prize for that success." Hawk listened intently to every word from Carver, a wave of disappointment washing over him. Carver revealed that his plan was to unleash a biological weapon at Times Square, a horrific act that would leave millions of innocent people suffering. But what shocked Hawk even more was when Carver said he would pin the blame on a fake terrorist group, making everyone believe it was a real attack, and he would escape any responsibility. Disappointment and rage flooded through Hawk. He couldn't believe that all his efforts and those of his team had been twisted into such a cruel plan. But amid the despair, his gaze remained unyielding. Hawk knew he couldn't let Carver win. He couldn't allow him to carry out this insane scheme. He held on to the hope that he could find a way out of this, even in the toughest of circumstances. Carver stood up, his gaze as cold as a predator's. "Hey, Hawk, I'm going to leave you alone in this darkness, but don't worry. I'll let you know what happens next." He stepped out of the room, leaving Hawk in solitude and fear. The heavy door closed behind him, the sound of the lock clicking like a sentence for his fate. In the darkness, Hawk suppressed a whirlwind of emotions. He knew that everything had gone terribly wrong, yet he refused to give up hope. He recalled the beautiful memories alongside his teammates, the battles they had fought, and the reasons they fought. It was for freedom, for the innocent who shouldn't have to bear the sins inflicted by the enemy. With his heart pounding, he was determined to escape this place, not just to save himself, but also to thwart Carver's sinister plot. The image of Hawk in the darkness, resilient and unyielding, fills them with worry for his fate. Will he be able to find a way out of this place? Is his determination enough to confront a ruthless enemy like Carver? This question remains unanswered, and the final image is Carver's silhouette fading away, leaving Hawk in the dark, where despair is overshadowing all light. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight began to peek through the towering skyscrapers of New York, yet the air was still thick with anxiety and tension. Amid the sounds of the city coming to life, a small army was hurriedly gearing up for a rescue mission. Lieutenant Colonel Sanchez led the Delta Force team, seasoned soldiers ready for a mission with an outcome no one could predict. The Hawk Detention Facility is located in an incredibly secluded area where thick concrete walls loom and flickering lights shine like cold, unfeeling eyes. Sanchez ordered the team to get ready, each step light yet resolute. They understood that this raid was not just about rescuing a comrade, it was about saving the faith and hope for everyone fighting for this city. As they stepped inside, gunfire erupted in the air. The soldiers descended like a gust of wind, swift and precise, taking out the guards on watch. The shootout was brief but intense. Bullets whizzed by and the deafening blasts shook the ground. But under Sanchez's brilliant leadership, they found Hawk, who was being held in a dark room, his eyes reflecting panic and exhaustion. When the door swung open, freedom appeared before Hawk like a dream. He immediately rushed into the arms of his teammates, feeling the warmth and safety wrap around him like a comforting balm. For the first time in many days, he no longer felt alone. At a temporary base in Queens, this reunion was not just a moment of joy, but also a powerful source of motivation. Hawk looked into the eyes of Marcus and Lisa, his comrades who had stood by him through fierce battles. He pushed past the fear in his heart, and with a deep, resonant voice, he declared that he would rise to fight to the end, not just for himself, but for all those who had sacrificed for this city. As everyone sat around the table, a tense yet hopeful atmosphere enveloped the room. The group began analyzing the data that Sanchez had gathered. They identified that a shipment of biological weapons was being loaded onto a ship at the New York port, a sinister plan that the enemy was quietly executing. Marcus, with his strategic talents, started outlining a detailed attack plan. Everyone listened intently to his every word, from assigning tasks to each person to the techniques needed to neutralize the weapons. Hawk, now regaining his confidence, joined in the preparation of the weapons. He selected the guns he felt were right, and along with Lisa, they got the C4 explosives ready, along with the necessary tools for the upcoming battle. The team members worked together, assembling each part securely, just like their unity. Each person understood that in this fight, no one could stand on the sidelines. They all had an important role, and each individual contributed to the strength of the entire team. In the quiet moments amidst the hustle and bustle of preparations, the whole group looked at each other, understanding that they had become a family. The challenges they had faced couldn't bring them down. Instead, they ignited a fire of determination within them. Hope returned, and they felt the strength that came from their unity. The glances, the smiles, and the words of encouragement created a feeling as if they were standing at the threshold of a great battle. As the evening light began to fade, they were ready for the final battle. By this point, everything had been perfectly prepared. They knew that what lay ahead wouldn't be easy, but with friendship and courage they would fight. They weren't just fighting for themselves, but for all those who had ever lived in and loved this city. Now, they were no longer solitary individuals, but a united army, determined to protect New York from any threat. The final battle awaited them, and they would not back down. The darkness enveloped the New York harbor, with shimmering neon lights reflecting on the water like twinkling stars in the heart of the city. In a hidden corner, the Hawk crew was gearing up for their daring infiltration. Lisa, a cybersecurity expert, had used her skills to bypass the harbor's intricate security systems. They had spent months planning for this night, and now everything was set. The lights from the massive cargo ships illuminated the gigantic containers, creating a tense and thrilling atmosphere. Once inside, the team split into two groups. Hawk and Marcus would confront the ship head-on, while Lisa and Sanchez stayed back to provide remote support, ensuring they could monitor the situation and make timely decisions. Marcus, with a determined look on his face, gripped his gun tightly, ready for the fight. Hawk, the leader of the team, felt the weight of responsibility as he prepared to lead his teammates into danger. They knew time was running out, and the deadly weapons on the ship would soon be activated. As soon as they set foot on the dock, gunfire erupted all around. The deafening blasts rang out as Marcus used explosives to take out the guards, clearing a path for the team to advance. They moved swiftly between the containers, making the most of the terrain to dodge bullets whizzing past their heads. The shouts of Echelon mercenaries blended with the gunfire, creating a chaotic yet intensely dramatic scene. Hawk charged into battle, facing off against elite mercenaries who were well-trained and not easily subdued. Every step he took was calculated with a clear strategy and an unshakable determination. The flickering lights from the ships cast strange shadows, making the fight even more intense. Marcus, with his agility, created an opening for Hawk, but confronting Echelon was anything but easy. Bullets whizzed by, and for a moment, Hawk felt as if time had come to a standstill. Meanwhile, Lisa and Sanchez kept a close eye on their teammates from a distance. Lisa sat in front of the computer screen, her eyes sharp like a fox, analyzing the data and security cameras. She knew that just one small mistake could lead to everything falling apart. Sanchez, her reliable partner, was always ready to lend a hand, monitoring the situation while being prepared for anything that might come up. They noticed the ship had started to move, and there were only 30 minutes left before the weapon would be activated. The tension was palpable, like a tightly wound spring just waiting to snap. Hawk and Marcus had taken down the security system, but the ship's movement made everything even more urgent. They couldn't let the weapons fall into the wrong hands. While Marcus sniped at the remaining enemies, Hawk whispered strategies into his ear, encouraging and motivating him. His eyes sparkled with determination, like a blazing fire. They both knew this wasn't just a fight for honor, it was a battle to reclaim peace for the city, for the lives of millions of innocent people. Hawk and Marcus were like tireless warriors, pouring every ounce of strength into each shot and every step they took. But the pressure was mounting, and the roar of the ship's engines echoed like a relentless reminder of time slipping away. They needed to act faster than ever before. Suddenly, a loud explosion rang out, forcing the whole team to fall back. Marcus glanced at Hawk, and they both understood that there was no time left to hesitate. They had to board the ship immediately before it was too late. Like a storm, they charged onto the ship, where the mercenaries awaited them with cold, piercing stares. The bright lights from the equipment cast a harsh glow, creating an atmosphere thick with tension and drama. Hawk took the lead, with Marcus right behind him, both ready for the fight of their lives. They understood that this was the defining moment, where everything they had prepared would be put to the test. Their mood right now is like a live wire, electric with excitement and determination. Everything is converging into a single point, and just one tiny mistake could bring it all crashing down. But they don't have time to worry. The battle between good and evil has begun, and they won't stop until they claim victory. Amid the explosions of bombs and the flames erupting from the ship's compartment, Hawk felt adrenaline surging through his body. He charged up onto the deck where Carver was waiting, a cold smile plastered on his face. In the dim light, Hawk noticed Carver mocking him, dredging up painful memories from the past. "The Afghan hero, huh? Just a failure," Carver sneered, his voice echoing in the dark space. Each of his words felt like daggers stabbing at Hawk's self-esteem, but now those memories were no longer a burden. He couldn't let the past control him one more time. Hawk charged forward, gripping Carver's hands tightly. The battle between the two escalated fiercely, with punches, kicks, and debris from the sinking ship engulfed in flames all around them. They rolled on the ground as explosions from the weapon storage compartments echoed like a reminder of the urgency of the fight. Hawk felt the pain from his old wounds, but he knew this wasn't the time to be weak. He thought of Marcus "Tank" Johnson, his brave teammate who had always stood by him in the toughest moments. At that moment, in a decisive instant, Tank appeared beside them, his eyes filled with determination. He had placed the C4 explosives exactly where they needed to be to destroy the weapons compartment. But unfortunately, a stray bullet had zipped through the air and struck him. Hawk saw Tank collapse, yet his gaze remained bright, showing no signs of fear. "Hawk, this mission has to be completed," Tank whispered, his voice weak but resolute. "You have to trigger it. Stop Carver." Hawk felt a wave of sorrow swell in his heart, but he didn't have time to weep. Tank had sacrificed himself for the mission, for the safety of innocent lives. He couldn't let his comrades die in vain. Hawk nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. He knew this wasn't just a personal battle, it was a fight for what was right. He turned to face Carver, who stood there with a defiant look on his face. "You're not getting away," Hawk said with a tone full of determination, refusing to let fear shake his resolve. In that moment, Hawk felt the strength from memories and friendship. He charged at Carver, and the fight became more intense than ever. Both were exhausted, but neither was willing to back down. Finally, with a powerful kick, Hawk knocked Carver down onto the deck. He lay there motionless, his eyes filled with hatred, but no longer able to continue. Hawk quickly returned to where Tank was, the spot where he had planted the C4. A wave of guilt and helplessness washed over him, but he knew this was the moment of truth. He took a deep breath, placed his hand on the trigger, and pressed down. The sound of the explosion erupted, a deafening blast signaling the end of everything. The ship began to shake, and fierce flames erupted, consuming every trace of the brutality that Carver had inflicted. Hawk had no time to think. He jumped into the water, feeling the cold embrace of the waves around him like a release. As he surfaced, he glanced back at the ship where brilliant flames erupted against the night sky. A mix of relief and sorrow washed over him. He had completed his mission, but the cost was steep. He had lost a friend, a comrade. But he knew that Tank's sacrifice would never be forgotten. Amidst the raging waves, Hawk swam toward the shore, his heart heavy but his spirit filled with determination. Even though many challenges lay ahead, he had proven that, even in the darkest moments, friendship and courage remained the guiding light. Hawk understood that the battle was not over, but at least a part of Carver had been destroyed forever. His story and that of his friends would continue, with memories and sacrifices that would live on in his heart. Hawk lay on the beach, the bright sun shining down, but inside him, everything felt clouded. After the explosion at the port, he was rescued by the JSOC forces, but the pain of loss still lingered in his mind. The news reported on his heroic actions, praising his bravery in thwarting a terrorist plot. However, beneath that surface of glory, Hawk knew that this honor couldn't fill the void of what he had lost. Echelon Corp, with its dark secrets, is now under investigation. Carver, the one who had lured and manipulated him all this time, has been taken down. It feels like justice has been served, but Hawk still doesn't feel any joy. The images of Marcus and his teammates who sacrificed themselves in that battle keep flashing in his mind, their youthful, passionate faces. They fought for an ideal, and now that ideal brings forth a deep sense of sorrow. In search of peace, Hawk decided to visit the military cemetery in Long Island. As he stepped onto the grounds, the air was fresh, but his heart felt heavy. The gravestones stood in neat rows, each one a story, a life that had come to an end. He walked along the row of graves, feeling the enveloping silence. Finally, he stopped in front of a familiar headstone. It was Marcus's grave. Hawk knelt down, placing a bouquet of fresh flowers on the grave. Tears streamed down his cheeks, mingling with his longing and gratitude. He recalled the sweet memories, the laughter, and the late-night conversations. Marcus wasn't just a teammate. He was a close friend, someone who had believed in him and supported him during his toughest times. "I'm so sorry, Marcus," Hawk whispered. "I couldn't protect you." But in that moment of silence, Hawk felt something deep within him. He knew that Marcus and the others who had sacrificed so much didn't want him to live in pain. They had fought for a brighter future, and now that responsibility rested on his shoulders. Hawk realized that while he couldn't change the past, he could choose the future. He could carry on the fight that Marcus and his comrades had begun to protect the values they had fought so hard for. As Hawk left the cemetery, his soul felt liberated from its burdens. He was no longer alone. He carried within him the strength of those who had sacrificed. The memories of them would always be his motivation to rise above. Hawk knew he could make a difference, not just for himself, but for generations to come. Hawk returned to life. But now, he was not just a soldier. He was a symbol of hope, determination, and courage. He began participating in community activities, sharing his story and the lessons learned from those who had fallen. He wanted to ignite a sense of patriotism and responsibility in the young people, helping them understand that freedom is not a given, but something that must be protected and cherished. Each passing day, Hawk felt a revival in his soul. He no longer lived in the past, but looked toward the future, where Marcus's dreams might one day become a reality. He knew that the road ahead would be full of challenges, but with each step he took, he felt stronger, more confident. At last, Hawk stood on the beach where he had once confronted painful memories. Now that beach was not just a place where he had witnessed loss, but also the spot where he decided to start anew. He took a deep breath, feeling the freedom and warm sunlight, as if Marcus was standing beside him, smiling and encouraging him. Hawk had found peace within himself, and with each wave that lapped at the shore, he knew that his fight was far from over, for those who had sacrificed for a better future. Hawk returned to Brooklyn not just with the heavy baggage of painful memories from the battlefield, but also with a new mission in his heart. After years of living in solitude and locking himself away in his fears, he realized that to heal himself, he needed to share his story with others, especially fellow veterans like himself. The idea of a support center for veterans to reintegrate into society began to blossom in his mind. He wanted to create a safe space where people could talk, listen, and empathize. A place where they could find the support they needed to overcome the struggles in their lives. Hawk spent months planning for his center, from searching for the perfect location to fundraising and recruiting volunteers who shared his vision. He worked tirelessly, not just for himself, but for his teammates who sacrificed so much, those who never got the chance to tell their stories. Finally, an opening ceremony was held, attended by many veterans, family members, and friends. Hawk stood on stage, his face filled with emotion, his eyes shining with faith and hope. At the grand opening, he shared his story, from the painful experiences he faced in the military to his journey of rediscovering himself. He spoke of the long, sleepless nights, the nightmares that haunted him from the battlefield, and the times he felt like a burden to those around him. However, Hawk also made sure to highlight the moments of light that helped him rise again, like the friends and volunteers who stood by him during his toughest times without hesitation. He emphasized that no one should face their pain alone, and everyone deserves a chance to live a fulfilling life. The talk ended with thunderous applause. The attendees not only felt the sincerity in every word he spoke, but they were also inspired by the courage of someone who had relentlessly fought to reclaim the light within himself. They left with a renewed sense of purpose, as if they had discovered a strength within themselves that they had never known before. After the ceremony, Hawk stood alone on the Brooklyn Bridge, a place he had crossed countless times in the years before. But today, the Brooklyn Bridge was no longer just a simple bridge. It had become a symbol of his journey, of his relentless efforts to build a stronger community. The afternoon sun shone down, casting shimmering rays on the water, bringing him a sense of tranquility and peace. He gazed toward the horizon, where the brilliant golden light of the sun was slowly setting, and his heart swelled with hope. Hawk understood that despite the challenges and obstacles ahead, he had a place to start over, a mission to pursue, and a community to overcome together. In that moment, he felt empowered by those who had once fought alongside him, those who had never given up hope. He decided to not only live for himself, but also to inspire others. That was what he had learned from his pain, that courage and sacrifice could conquer the darkness, bringing light to the community. As the last rays of the sun faded away, Hawk felt a deep sense of peace within his soul. He knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready. With a heart full of hope, he turned his back on the Brooklyn Bridge, facing the future with a smile on his lips. His story wouldn't end here. It would continue to be written through actions, dreams, and relentless efforts to bring light to others. Hawk, the former soldier, had now become a symbol of courage and rebirth, a guiding light for lost souls to find their own brightness in life. Hawk's story has come to an end, but the journey of courage and hope continues to resonate. From the rain-soaked streets of Brooklyn to the life-and-death battle at the New York harbor, Hawk teaches us that even when darkness surrounds us, the light within our souls will always guide the way. He not only saved the city, but also rediscovered himself, inspiring us to face the challenges in our lives. Thank you for joining us on the Legendary Narratives channel. Please leave a like if this story touched your heart, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next emotional journeys. What have you learned from Hawk? Share with us. We'll see you again in the new Legendary Stories.